Good morning. So this is our third week of the Path of Integrity series, and for the past 2 weeks, we've looked at our integrity as a core quality that allows us to listen to a true voice from the Lord, and and to stay on the course to our good dreams. And this week, we'll be looking at four main points. There are a lot of points, right? So first, Joseph is casted away and he's trapped in an underground prison. Second, Pharaoh dreams bad dreams that he cannot and his people cannot understand. Third, now they look for Joseph for help. Lastly, Joseph is lifted out of the pit. His hair is shaved, he's given a new clothes. And my hope is as we look at those, we ask questions like, when do we recognize the need of calling our Joseph back? And what does it mean for us to lift him up the prison and give him the respect and the care he deserves? And what does it mean that Joseph is able to interpret Pharaoh's dream? And let's talk about Joseph first. At the end of chapter, Joseph eventually rises to his greatness. He becomes the prime minister or a governor of Egypt. But before that, he was, so to speak, a forgotten man. Or Joseph, in the beginning of the reading this morning, he is in a dungeon, prison for years. And where is a prison? I've never been there. Hope you don't. It's where people with a lie, fraud, crimes, and violence are put together there. So in one sense, they are put aside there together because they are not useful, nor they are worthy or wanted by the whole world. In a word, he's been forgotten. Joseph, he's forgotten by the whole world. But was Joseph that useless to be thrown into that pit? This is the second time to be thrown in a pit. Second time. Was Joseph a threat to people and to the world? As I said, he was just being he who was. He stood out for what he believed, and it got him into constant misfortunes on him. And it seems that all the qualities that he stands for is not properly recognized. The people around him, they don't get it. They are incapable of seeing and appreciating his integrity, his high work ethic, intentions of his goodness and honesty. And he's got another special talent of interpreting dreams. And that part is also forgotten by the butler for 2 years. Note that this week is really about Joseph's ability for dream interpretation. And we'll get there, but I'd like to put it out first for some initial thoughts. His ability to interpret other people's dreams is about how things begin to make sense to us when we put our integrity first, when we put the Lord and put others first. That's a different world that we are trying, and when we do that, it gets different. The way we see the world or the things around us becomes different, and that's about Joseph's interpretation. But Joseph, before we get there, where is Joseph? He is in prison, but he gets out of there because of what? Because of who? Because there's an important person who wants him. And it's Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And I'll talk more about what it was like to be Pharaoh in those days. But why Pharaoh wants him in the story? I mean, from the reading, we know that Pharaoh had these two bizarre dreams, like riddles, and he kind of senses that the dreams are bad signs about the future. So he summoned everyone in his kingdom who is intelligent and wise, including all the magicians, and yet no one is able to give him an answer. And luckily, the butler remembers Joseph and his ability to interpret dreams. So that is how Joseph gets called and gets out of the prison. And here is something about us. Pharaoh and his people's struggle in understanding the dreams can represent a time when we cannot make sense out of the world. Even though we have all the knowledge and all the experiences and resources we have. And let's talk about Pharaoh to see that point. I mean, Egypt back then, in those days, it was a powerful kingdom. Its king, Pharaoh, had a great power, a lot of resources, and especially their knowledge in the ancient science. But again, when he got everything, he himself and his people are not able to understand what is going on in the dream. So, let's come back to us. How about us? Let's say we are one of the elites who's got money, education, and life experiences, and so on. And in fact, we don't have to be an elite to have those these days. We can learn and know much. But let's say we are. But you know what? A lot of people like that, even though they have everything they want, they're still not happy. They are unhappy because they don't have answers to fundamental life questions. They or we may have questions such as where we are going after we die. Does our death mean we lose everything we have worked for? I mean, these are some heavy-duty existential questions, but we also may ask, such as why we are not happy when we have everything we wanted and we need. Or why do we still suffer? Why doesn't my anxiety or our anxiety go away? And so on. And these are spiritual questions about deeper part of our lives that cannot be answered by the world. I mean, the world where smart people out there, they have a lot of theories. And some of them will tell us that, it's all about your brain chemistry. It's all about hormones. So they might say, take some pills and, everything will start, feeling better. But I don't think that really answers our questions. So again, Pharaoh's struggle in understanding the dreams represents a time when we can't make sense out of the world. Our knowledge, our education, and our life experience just can't tell us why. And the story this morning lays out an important message. When things don't make sense, we can think about Joseph, or think like Joseph. We can happily and humbly admit that we've forgotten that young, brilliant man. Now we come to remember that this young man is able to tell us what is really going on in our lives, and he can tell us how to help ourselves. And it can be useful to think about what Joseph represents or symbolizes in a deeper sense. He represents the Lord's presence in us, especially his ability to interpret dreams represents wisdom that comes from our love of the Lord and his truth. It represents our discernment or wisdom we have when we think from the Lord and His truth. It represents our wisdom we are given by the Lord when we put our hearts in goodness and matters of our spiritual life. But we need to take some actions. We need to get Joseph out of the prison first and give him the care that he deserves. And we can imagine for all of those years, Joseph has not shaved and properly trimmed himself. Probably is covered with long and messy hair. His clothing is ragged and dirty. So now it's time for us to give him the proper care. We trim his hair, we give him a new clothing. And there is he. We get back our handsome, brilliant, and God-talented Joseph. I mean, that's a literal description of him, but in a deeper sense, that represents the beauty of his goodness and wisdom. But here are some practical applications. Then how do we give Joseph the proper care and attention? What do we do to get him outside of the prison, to shave his hair and give him a new clothing? One of the best ways to do that is we cut down. We cut down anything that is unnecessary from our lives. For example, we cut down unnecessary information and worries. I hate to say this, but I'll have to say, there's so much of junk information out there these days. I mean, there's some good information too, but most of the time, we spend hours and hours in binge watching shows and videos and shorts that are just time consuming, redundant, and sometimes not healthy at all. And you know what they do to us? They give us more worries and anxieties instead of some good inspiration to start a new day. And I'm sorry to tell you that they don't give us the answers we need. So let's be selective in what we see and read. We trim our thoughts and mind from unnecessary junks and informations and worries, so that now we can get our focus back on what comes from within, from the Lord. And when we are able to do it, it would be like we are trimming the mess and the dust of Joseph's hair, so that his beauty now comes to the front. And we can think of a similar application with giving Joseph a new clothing, but the point would be the same. Let Joseph speak to us. Let Joseph interpret our dreams, our problems in his worldview. In the end, Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams while he humbly says that those interpretations belong to God or the Lord. And Joseph's interpretation of them is like restoring our worldview that didn't work. It's like shining a new light to the world that did not work to us. Now, our world or the surrounding that we engage every day, it begins to make sense. It gives a new meaning to our lives. And the secret or the recipe to it is because we put the Lord and other people as our goal, as our use of our lives. And that doesn't sound promising or plausible. But remember, Joseph, he was a never favored and popular one except by his father, Jacob. But really, people did not appreciate him until his world begins to make sense. And we could think about this backward. When we put everything about ourselves and think about making our basic needs met, what may happen is our world can crumble before too long. That worldview is one that makes us worried all the time, feel hollow from within, be trapped in self-pity, and eventually drifted away. Whereas the Lord's worldview tells us that our world becomes much more meaningful, it makes much more sense when we put other people first. At least, at least as much as we care ourselves. Then what may happen? All the dots that did not make sense to us, now they get connected to each other and it begins to make sense for us. Now we can live in a clear awareness of where we are going. And that is the path that the Lord lead us to, and we are humbly and willingly walk. Amen.